Hi everyone, Kathy here. As I hope most of you know, we've wrapped up our first nonprofit collaboration week just before the Thanksgiving holiday. And one of the sessions that we had was the legislative update from the Florida Nonprofit Alliance. Leah McDermott ended that session with some suggestions on how to use collaboration to do effective advocacy work and to be sure that our nonprofit voices are being heard and considered. And she left the session and all of us there with what she called the 6 C's for collaborative action. So I just want to take a minute to highlight those for you here. The first C was communication from trusted sources. In other words, make sure that you're getting and vetting the information from sources that you really trust and that you know the information is accurate. She talked about things like coalitions, the Cultural Alliance, their own Florida Nonprofit Alliance, the National Council on Nonprofits. There's just so much information out there that we really need to be able to assess the information that we're getting is trusted. The second C was coalition building. You hear us talk about this a lot. Organizations getting together around a joint purpose or mission. It doesn't have to be about advocacy, but oftentimes it can be that there's, that's part of the coalition's goal. But there's all different types of coalitions: literacy coalitions, disaster relief coalitions, hospice and palliative care coalitions, and many, many more. And what Leah shared was that elected officials really pay careful attention when nonprofit groups come together in these sorts of connections. The third C was consistent messaging. So as we're getting together and being able to speak and communicate with our elected officials, we want to be sure that we're using our consistent messaging. You have a lot of this messaging already at your disposal, but in particular, she highlighted that when we're talking with elected officials, you want to be sure that you keep your information short, clear, and direct, and that you are sure that you're talking about impact and making an ask of the official that you're speaking with. What is it that you want them to do? The other thing she highlighted was to stress localizing. It's one thing to talk about, the big data numbers across the state or across the country or even across a region, but when you can share with an elected official that in your district, in your region, in your county, wherever it is, this is the number of volunteers we have in that space. These are the number of donors that we're working with. These are the number of families we're caring for. If you can localize that information, that becomes really highly valued to that elected officials. It just makes sure that your information is being heard. And then she also stressed in that consistent messaging piece that when right now the sort of hot topics people are listening to are around food support, disaster relief, crisis relief, and family support. So if there's a way to sort of gauge or look through one of those lenses as you're sharing your information, that will be heard more effectively. The fourth C was to contact your elected officials. It is okay to do that. And being able to tell a localized and collective story is really important. You can even position yourself as a subject matter expert for the topic, or the mission, the work that you do. She gave us a great caution on that information, in particular, making sure that as you're looking and doing your research on social media, that you're paying close attention to making sure you're using and interacting on the government official site and not the candidate page or campaign page. You want to be sure you are interacting with them on the government official site, and it will say that on the Facebook page or the Instagram site. So you want to look for that. I thought that was a really good tip. 2 more very quickly. One was compliance. Again, if we're putting our information out there, if we're talking to elected officials, if we're sharing collective stories together, we want to be sure that our organizations are in legal compliance. So if you haven't checked that in a while, there's some great online checklists. FNA has one, but others do as well. You can just be sure that your 990 is up to date. Just everything is official, because there's nothing worse than telling a really powerful, impactful story and then having somebody dig up something that's going on in your organization that maybe you didn't even know about. Maybe a 990 was delayed or whatever the thing may be. So make sure that you know that your organization is in good compliance. And then her last C, and this is so important, is be sure that you are celebrating your wins. This is a tough time for the nonprofit space, but it's not the only tough time we'll ever face. And those of us who've been doing this for a while know that. So while we're celebrating, that does a couple of things. It really helps us internally with stress management and self-care, making sure that we've got an opportunity to pause and be excited about the good stuff that's happening. But it also gives our elected officials good information and some bright spots that they can hang on to. So I hope that this is helpful. More information is available throughout the newsletter about the various activities from the week. And we look forward to continuing to bring you some highly valued information. Thanks for listening.